Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics, and today we got David Lacarelli on. He is the creator-writer of Tinsel Town by Alterna Comics. If you haven't read this yet, you need to read it. If you like action-adventure stories, you're going to really love this. It follows a young lady named Abby who dream is to become a police officer, and the way that she gets hired and some of the things that she needs to go through in order to work up to that is absolutely amazing. Really thoughtful and fun book to read. This is the trade of it, but you could get the individual issues at alternacomics.com. But yeah, you got to check this out. A lot of fun. David also has written the Children's Vampire Hunting Brigade. You want to check out that comic as well. He also is in a band, Dame Fortune. They put out about 3 CDs. You can go to Spotify and look that up. A lot of fun. But the main thing that's going on with David is he has a current Kickstarter that you should be supporting. If you've read Tinsel Town, you know that his writing style and this book is a lot of fun. I personally will be supporting the Kickstarter. And what's great about the Kickstarter is there are all kinds of different rewards, including a lot of the music from Dame Fortune, a lot of pinup artists, and a lot of pinups that will be available too that you can see in the back here. But check them out. David Lacarelli. Without further ado, here is our time together. I hope you enjoy. Thanks, David, for joining, and talk soon. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining World at War Comics today. Our guest is David Lacarelli. David, how are you today?
I'm good. I've got my morning cup of coffee right here. So yeah.
a crucial thing first thing in the morning for me.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
don't function too. I'm not sure I function well after either, but I certainly think I function better with coffee.
I have that same illusion. Yes.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you joining me. We had a great opportunity, at least I did, to meet you in person at ValorCon out in Paris, California, a long ways from home for you. But man,
Yeah.
it was really cool to see you because I did have Tinsel Town already. And so I did get through the first issue. And then I saw you there, and then you had the trade, which I thought was really, here it is, the trade, which I thought was really awesome. So I was able to get through that and get more of the story of Abby, which is an incredible story. So, but
Oh, thank
before
you.
we get into that, man, I would like to kind of take it back. How long
Sure.
have you been a comic book fan? You remember the first time that you read a comic? Has it been a big part of your life, or is it something a little bit newer?
No, I've been a fan all my life. I mean, I don't remember the very first comics that I read, but I'm sure by the time I was in kindergarten or first grade, I was definitely reading them, and I think I went to my first convention when I was maybe in second grade.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's been a lifelong love of the medium for sure. I grew up loving Jack Kirby, and later when it got into the early '80s, artists like Dave Stevens. First comics books like Grim Jack and John Sable Freelance.
Oh, yeah.
And in terms of writers, Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, early Frank Miller, love The Walking Dead, so all that kind of stuff. I never really stopped.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you didn't because we got some pretty cool stuff that you've been able to do, I think, because of that. So that's kind of cool. Your first comic book that you got into, I was kind of doing a little bit. Was it If?
If no, I don't.
Oh, which one was your first comic? Was it before? There was one before Tinseltown, correct?
Oh yeah, the Children's Vampire Hunting
That's
Brigade.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
and that was the first time I worked with Tinseltown artist Henry Ponciano too. So yeah, the Brigade is kind of a coming of age gothic adventure,
Yeah.
punk rock Buffy set in Scotland. And the reason it's set in Scotland, it was inspired by the real life Gorbals vampire incident. So in 1950s Scotland, hundreds of school kids went looking for a vampire in this one cemetery in real life. It was considered mass hysteria at the time, but in our book, they find it, they form the Brigade, and then a half century later, there's a couple delinquents drinking in that graveyard on the night that the vampires come back. So there's 3 volumes in that series, and you can actually get the complete Brigade in a nice slipcase with some additional unreleased art as part of the Tinseltown Losing the Light Kickstarter.
Nice, nice. So the Kickstarter is live right now, correct?
Yes, we have a little more than 2 weeks to go, and I think we're at about 73% funding. So, we're doing good, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Kickstarters are amazing, right? For the opportunity, but so nerve-wracking, especially when you get down to like we did one too. And that last 2 weeks, man, I just was looking every day and it was very nerve-wracking. Like, man, did I do it wrong? Is something going on? And yeah. So we
Yeah, it's
need to
it's
get out
very
there and support it.
stressful.
Yes, very stressful.
You get that dopamine hit every time you get a new backer, and then if it's been too long between, you start to get that jittery kind of feeling like, is this it? Is this it?
Exactly. Well, it sounds like there's some pretty cool stuff though that is part of the package if you jump in. So I definitely will jump in, and I hope others will too.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I love your writing style. Tinsel Town is an amazing story. Can you tell us how you came about that story?
Yeah, sure. So Tinseltown it's a period crime drama. It's about one of the first female police officers in Hollywood. It's been likened to L.A. Confidential meets Boardwalk Empire,
Mhm.
and there's two graphic novels in the series. There's the first one that you just showed,
Yes,
Tinseltown,
yes.
and then the second one that the Kickstarter is for is Tinseltown Losing the Light. So both of these are director's cut editions, so they have 5 additional pages of comic story to them that aren't in the miniseries they're collecting. In the case of Tinseltown Losing the Light, it also collects the Tinseltown short Pinboy, which appeared and it came out on a Wednesday. Then there's additional pinups in each volume that haven't been released, and in Losing the Light, there's going to be an introduction by Tony Isabella, who is the creator of Black Lightning.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
so that's and in terms of where I got the idea, my mother, Miriam Lacarelli, was a police officer for 20 years. Probably served as a Pittsburgh police officer, and in some ways, Tinseltown is my tribute to her.
That's awesome.
And then, I was doing research and I found out that, interestingly enough, around 1915, Universal Studios was kind of a proto-feminist organization in some ways, in that they had a female mayor, police chief, police officers. Now, those officers kind of functioned as a cross between security guards and people there to sort of amuse and assist the tourists. And they weren't above marching them in short skirts and parades to appeal to more prurient interests. But I thought that was an interesting dichotomy. And in doing research for Tinseltown Losing the Light, I discovered that they were not the only studio that had female police officers. Actually, D.W. Griffith's studio
Hmm.
did that as well, in part because those studios were such huge production factories. Then you had thousands of extras coming and going from the lot every day,
Hmm.
and the officers kind of were like school marms, making sure none of the extras went, down a corridor, dark alley, and got up to hanky panky or anything like that. So yeah, and Tinseltown is the story of Abigail Moore. She's the daughter of a fallen police officer, and she originally goes to try to join the LAPD. The LAPD did actually have a limited amount of female police officers at the time, because even back then you had female runaways, prostitutes, drug addicts. And the male officers obviously didn't feel comfortable doing strip searches and that kind of thing, so they hired a few female police officers, but there wasn't room for Abigail. So she responds to this ad from Utopia Studios, where they are, quote, auditioning
Yeah.
for police officers. And so she kind of starts off being not exactly a real cop, but she finds some real life crimes along the way, and gets to hone her chops to become a real police officer.
Yeah.
And
I
in
like when
losing,
they give her a gun and it has caps in it. Go, you didn't
yes,
on this or
yes,
anything. Like, oh, you'll be fine. It was like no big deal.
right, yeah, and they give her a uniform that they call a costume,
Yeah.
because yeah, not everything in
Tomato, tomato,
Hollywood is.
costume, uniform, same thing, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Now, in losing the light, she's returning back to work from some injuries she sustained in volume 1,
Right.
and there's been a series of mysterious accidents on the lot, and she's trying to get to the bottom of those. But meanwhile, there is a big sex scandal with one of the studio's biggest stars that results in protesters on the lot and politicians calling for the banning of her films. And suddenly, the studio is looking at some dire financial straits. They're a few weeks away from not being able to make payroll. And a German director approaches them. Who has just come over from Germany, and Germany at this point is engaged in what we now call the First World War.
Mhm.
And he says, listen, I've got the answer to all your problems. I want to do a big costume drama. It's not going to cost the studio anything. And to avoid any accidents or problems, we'll shoot it down in Mexico, you
Mhm.
know. And Abigail Moore's boss, Miss Redwood, says, yeah, this seems a little too good to be true. I want you to go down and chaperone the production and just make sure it's all on the up and up. And spoiler alert, it's not. All hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, Abigail Moore emerges a changed person for all of the experiences she has in Mexico.
Wow, wow. Sounds amazing. I mean, it's such an adventure. I was just going through it and you get kind of sucked into the story and you can't stop. So I
Oh,
think that's
thank
what
you.
you want in a book, right? In general,
Yeah.
but especially a graphic novel like this. And the artwork is superb throughout the
Yeah,
entire thing.
Henry's fantastic. We've
Oh
been
my goodness.
working together for about 10 years now, and
Really.
he was great when we first started working together, and he only gets better with every page, every panel, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I mean, I don't know if I could just show a page, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty impressive, the artwork.
Oh yeah.
And then the covers are really cool too. And at the back of this, you have several different versions of the covers that are pinups, I should say, but they're just amazing. So, I mean, great work. Good job. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Luckily, I've had a lot of really talented artists that have wanted to do pinups,
Yeah.
you know, I think what we'll do for the Kickstarter, assuming we make our goal, is we'll just keep adding more pinups because I definitely have more artists that want to do them. So
That's so cool. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And that's just another reason why you should back it because there's all kinds of cool things that you could get out of it too.
yeah, yeah, we've got three soft and enamel pins that you can
Mhm.
get at one reward level. That's the Tinsel Town logo and Abby's face and a badge 226, which was also my mom's badge number.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we've got if you're into pinups, we have a Prince reward level and all kinds of good stuff, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So how did you partner with Alterna and Peter over there?
Yeah, so originally I had done Tinseltown as a graphic novel, and I just blindly submitted it to Alterna, and they wanted to publish it. But right around that time, they had just started the newsprint line, where
Mm,
they print books on newsprint like comic books used to,
yeah,
and which is kind of neat because they look and they feel and they smell like old comics.
it does.
Um,
Yeah, it brings you back for sure.
yeah, and it and you can get the single issues through the Kickstarter as well.
Yeah,
And it allows them to keep the price point fairly low. I think they started out at $1.50. Now they're
yeah.
$1.99. They're about to go up to $2.25. But
It's the least expensive comic book you're gonna buy is an Alterna comic book,
it
and,
is.
uh, I love that as a comic fan, and I love reading a lot of stories. Some of the comics have gotten so expensive,
Oh, I know.
like
Yeah,
9.99 for some of them, and they're like a monthly comic. I'm like, I mean, I'll get one for sure to try it out, but man, to pour out 120 bucks a year for one comic, I mean,
yeah.
you're asking a
It's
lot,
an
right?
investment at that point, especially
Investment,
when
yeah.
you consider how far we've come from 64 pages for a dime.
Yeah,
But um, but so, yeah, so anyhow, so they said, "Hey, would you like to publish it as a series?" And I said, "Sure." I'd kind of divided the pacing up in Tinseltown so that it could easily be divided that way, anyhow.
Mhm.
And so then it was just a matter of fine tuning some things and coming up with the additional covers, and and yeah, so that's how I got with Alterna. Now they published the first graphic novel, But now they've kind of shifted their business model a little bit, and they're just doing individual issues.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to put out the second graphic novel on my own imprint, which is Abacab Studios.
Yeah.
But Peter Samedi, the head of the company, is designing the graphic novel, so it's going to look, very consistent with the
That's
first
awesome.
one.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Yeah, you want that consistency, especially if you're a collector.
Yeah,
You like to
yeah,
have a little bit of consistency, so that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the children's vampire hunting. Is that through Alterna as well?
No, no. So that one I originally self-published the first 4 issues,
Okay.
and then I was at a con and I got approached by a company called Creator's Edge, and
Nice.
they said, "Hey, we'd like to put this together as a graphic novel and publish it." And so they did, and then they published volume 2,
Okay.
and then after that they stopped publishing other people's stuff. So so I put out volume 3 through Abacab Studios.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. And do you have a website, David, that people could go to, or how do they get their hands on that?
Yeah, so abacabstudios.com is the kind of my hub of
Yeah.
all the projects I'm doing. Just like the Genesis song ABACAB, studios.com.
Yeah.
And in terms of I'm on the net, I'm at David B. Lucarelli on Facebook and at David Lucarelli on Twitter.
Mhm.
And you can usually find me in one of those 2 places.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's get into some of the music. You've obviously
Sure.
been a big fan of rock for a very long time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about because I think that's an ongoing thing as well, right? You're still
Yeah,
doing
I mean,
gigs
sort
or-
of. Dame Fortune is the band that I'm a member of, and we're not really a fully active band at this point. I still record and release the occasional new song here and there under the name, but we were active throughout the 2000s. We released 3 CDs and a DVD, and then since then we've sporadically put out songs here and there. But if you were into like Kiss or Motley Crue or Guns N' Roses, that kind of thing, that's the sort of thing that we do. And you can actually there's a music bundle reward level for the Kickstarter too,
Oh,
where
that's cool.
you can get the music, and we'll send you all the physical stuff because it has the lyrics and the pictures and everything, but also digital high res copies of everything as well. And I also, speaking of music, there's a couple related projects that I do. I do a
Yeah,
podcast called Rock Album Analysts,
nice.
where we take myself and a couple lifelong friends and fellow musicians, we take a deep dive into a different rock album each week, and we've gone through the entire catalog of Kiss, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses. Right now we're kind of doing just started it back up again. We're doing best of hair metal kind of thing. So we just did Rat Out of the Cellar, and we're going to do Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry. Also kind of tangentially music related. I've written and produced a couple of plays.
Oh, wow.
So most recently, last year, I wrote and directed a play for the Hollywood Fringe Fest called Crude, which is about a fictitious 80s hard rock band that comes out of the gutters of Hollywood and becomes a cultural phenomenon, and how for one brief shining moment all things seem possible, that is in no way legally related to Motley Crue or endorsed by them or any of their members. But we had 2 sold out runs of that,
Wow.
and we filmed a version of the show too, so that's available as an on-demand pay-per-view that there's a reward level for on the Kickstarter as well.
Wow, that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
Kickstarter is all inclusive.
it
Anything.
is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it, man. I love it. And then what do you do for a living? I looked it up, right? You mentioned it, an ADR.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you share with us what you do for 20th Century Fox?
Yeah, so ADR stands for Automated Dialogue Replacement.
Hmm.
Basically, what it is actors and actresses come in post production for TV and film, and we record their voices, usually to add or change lines of dialogue, either because they're changing the line, or the sound quality is not good.
Hmm.
So they watch themselves on screen and they hear three beeps, and then where the fourth imaginary beep is, hopefully they speak more or less in sync with themselves to
Yeah.
redo the dialogue. Um, I'm actually I was at 20th Century Fox for a little bit more than 20 years. Now I'm primarily at a place called Periscope Post and Audio
Mhm.
in Hollywood, but I still go back and forth a little bit if 20th Century Fox needs me. So it's been cool. It's a good day job to have. I get to work with a lot of top directors and actors and actresses, and I think one of the things is that it's listening to them change and sometimes hone dialogue to make it as effective as it possibly can be for 20 plus years. I think has given me a pretty good ear for writing dialogue.
For sure. I mean, that's got to be a huge training over the last 20 years of,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
How different is it from a TV show or a movie to a comic book? Is there a lot of principles that are the same, you think?
Obviously, if it's a TV show or a movie, you are a cog in a much larger machine.
Hmm.
There's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are working on a big budget TV show or movie. Versus if you're doing comics, the team is usually relatively small. The letterer, myself, Henry,
Yeah.
the publisher. So probably not more than 4 or 5 people.
But as far as like laying out the story, right? You're doing it panel by panel in a comic book. I wonder
Yeah.
how close that is when you're working like on a TV show. If I'm obviously not broken down to that small, but I think I'm just guessing, right? I have no idea, but maybe
Mhm.
they're kind of playing out the story in the same fashion, almost like a panel. I don't know if that's true or no.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I use Final Draft when I write my rough scripts for Henry, and the way we work is I give him a panel by panel breakdown, but
Mhm.
always with the caveat that if he has a better idea how to break it up or
Yeah,
perspective on panels, to let him do that because he is the artist.
yeah,
And then he gives me roughs back, and if I have any notes about changes, I give him the notes, and then he gives me finals. And if I have any notes about changes after that, he'll do them, but then there's an additional charge at that point. And
right.
usually there I don't have any notes. We've been working together for so long now, we can pretty much read each other's minds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think animation too. They tend to hyper focus and be very granular and see the film one frame at a time. So yeah, there are definitely some parallels between the way that movies and comics work. I guess in comics you can manipulate the sense of space and time in terms of size of panels and how long you spend on each scene, but
Mhm.
there is still the factor that the person that's reading the comic is kind of in control of their own pace to a certain degree as well, versus like television and film, you're more or less at the mercy of the shots provided and the length of the shots as you're experiencing it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Interesting. And then tell us, I like to ask a lot of creators and writers this question, but how important is that relationship between the artist and the writer? Because you can only say so much in a comic book, page per page. And the art, according to my experience, it seems like it's extremely important to lead to the next panel or to maybe tell a part of the story that you just don't have the space to do in a written form. I don't know if that makes sense. It's almost a
Sure.
dance between the writer and the artist, and when it's done well, right, you really walk away with something very enjoyable to read. And when it's not done well, you almost feel like two people are supposed to be working on a project, almost like in high school when you randomly get picked to work with another person on some project that you have to do for your final, and neither of you have anything in common, and you could tell the finished product, right, are two separate things even though they should have been one thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a process to work to make sure that they are complementary but not redundant.
Yeah.
Like if you have a panel of Batman smashing his fist through a mirror, you probably don't need to say Batman was angry, right? I mean, it's
Exactly.
sort of self-evident, unless you want to do an Alfred Hitchcock and show the Statue of Liberty and right underneath it, New York City, is
Yeah.
kind of a nod and a wink that
Yeah.
to the audience that that they know, but you're just being coy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Henry's great at that. I mean, the interesting thing about comics is you're looking at key sort of parts of scenes, and then the mind fills in what happens in between each panel. And if you do it right, it should be a seamless process. In Losing the Light, we're expanding it a little bit, mostly for pacing reasons. And what I've found is that it's almost like a balloon. Once you start to decompress one section, then you really have to pay attention to the sections around it, because then they start to feel a little rushed. And so to make it consistent, you end up having to kind of decompress that whole area, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Well, I appreciate that. The other question I had was, when I spoke to you over the weekend, you mentioned you had a little bit of time due to the strike. I was
Oh
wondering
yeah.
if we could talk a little bit about the strike. I think there's a lot. I mean, if you read the news, right, everyone has an opinion as to why everything's happening. I would love to hear from a person who's actually affected by the strike, like, what is the true purpose of the strike? What is the goals out of the strike? How is it affecting people? I think people need to realize there's a whole host of people that are somewhat behind the scenes that are a major part of any production getting done, any story being told. But a lot of times we don't see that, right? We see the movie star, we see it in the theater, but you don't
Right.
realize everything that's happening behind. And I just would like to open it up to you to maybe share what you're experiencing and what the real reasons as to why this is taking place.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I am a writer, but I'm not a member of the writers union, but I am a member of the sound union,
Right.
essentially. And so for me personally, the last couple of months prior to the strike, there was some work, but it was very, very slow. And as soon as the strike hit, work just fell off a cliff, because a lot of the TV shows and movies simply didn't go into production in anticipation of the strike, and they didn't want to have the strike fall while they were in production, or they were in production and they simply stopped production because of it. And so, yeah, while the strike's been going on for a couple of weeks now, for me, it's really been going on for about 10 weeks because of that, and in terms of the whys and everything from the strike, I think the writers have a lot of very valid issues. The last time they went on strike, streaming was really a new thing, and the studios kind of said, hey, this is so brand new, we don't even know if we're ever going to make any money from this, so we can't really work out a big deal with you guys. And now, of course, the whole paradigm has shifted, and clearly there is money being made in streaming, and it's been more difficult for the writers too, because although we're living in kind of a golden age of television, that golden age is oftentimes, it means less episodes. So a series might only have 8 episodes, and that might be 8 episodes every year or every 2 years sometimes.
Wow.
And versus the network model was about 22 episodes a season. So yeah, all of a sudden now you have these writers that are trying to eke out a living, and they've got less than half the episodes, and they're making less, and they're not necessarily making the same kinds of royalties or residuals off those episodes because they're streaming. And they're not getting money for when these things go into syndication, because they don't really go into syndication if they start out streaming. And then on top of that, you have the whole factor of AI, and that's a whole Pandora's box that I think is gonna radically change the entire industry, and probably affect writers and sound people and everybody else in between. So, they're trying to figure out exactly what that means, and studios don't even really want to talk about that at this point. I think, AI has great potential. It's also very, very scary to me.
Yeah.
Right now we have text to image
Hmm.
stuff, and now they have what they call text to video, which is more like text to GIF at this point in the beta stages.
Right.
But you could see where 5-10 years from now that could evolve into voice to text to
Yeah.
real video, where you simply go home and say, hey, show me a movie in which I'm the star and Harrison Ford co-stars, and it's set in 1957 New York, and go. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Yeah. Really so. I mean,
yeah.
scary stuff, right? There's got to be a lot of rules kind of put in place as to how AI could be used because it's taking the human element out. And although it sounds fascinating, right, with the ability of AI, I think that human element in storytelling is extremely important. And I think
Yeah.
people might regret it down the road if everything AI starts taking over, and all of a sudden you get these weird stories where there's no human element to it, so there's no relatability to it. I mean, we're seeing the same thing in comic book art as well,
Hmm.
right?
Oh yeah, I know a lot of comic book artists are freaking out over it, and
Yeah,
I get it because
yeah,
to be honest, a lot of comic book companies don't have the best reputation when it comes to wanting to pay artists or pay them a fair
oh yeah,
wage. And so,
100%.
it's only a matter of time until some bottom feeding company comes along and goes, yeah, we'll just do all of our art AI, and then maybe hire an artist to touch up the hands, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's scary stuff. And there's been a big pushback. You could follow it on Twitter of artists, saying, guys, we got to stop this or no one's gonna have a job. And it's different art, right? There's not that intricacy that you could tell from a real artist putting a pen to paper. It looks amazing. Don't get me wrong. The AI looks incredible, but it's you could tell it's not done by a human, right? And I think that's really important too. I mean, you look at some of these artists out there. I mean, DC has Jorge Jimenez, who's from Brazil, incredible artist. I would hate for that kind of art to go away, right? Even the old Frank Miller, you mentioned Frank Miller stuff. Even his old stuff with Daredevil and some of the other stuff that he did. I mean, that's iconic. Todd McFarlane. How do you remove all of that and just make it like nothing? I mean, I don't know. It's really scary stuff, and there's got to be rules around AI and how it's used because it could create a lot of havoc, and I would hate for that human element to be gone myself.
Yeah, me too. And the great artists have always been stylists too. I mean, you
Yes,
can you can pick out and the interesting thing about Frank is he would frequently just reinvent his entire
exactly.
art style from project to project, which
Yeah,
is pretty amazing in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, I think AI will probably be pretty good at mimicking the house style of Marvel or DC, but it's not. You're not gonna have a creator like Jack Kirby
yeah,
come along, that's AI. I mean, that's yeah. You need a human being for that.
exactly, exactly. Interesting stuff. Sorry that you have to go through that, and but I've seen a lot of people out in the picket line, so it seems like there's a lot of support right now.
Yeah, I think
Everyone
so.
realizes that like this is something worth fighting for.
I think so. Now, interestingly enough, I think the actors and directors' contracts are set to expire in the beginning of June. So, as much as things are pretty much at a standstill in the industry right now,
Yeah.
they could very easily be, a dead stop all across the board in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Fingers crossed. Eventually, I'm sure a deal of some kind will be brokered.
Yeah, yeah, we hope so. But I mean, I just read some articles of some writers. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was one young lady who showed a picture of her streaming residual
Uh huh.
on a pretty big, I think it was a Netflix, and she wrote 2 episodes. Again, I wish I would have wrote her name down, but she showed a
Yeah.
residual check. She got 1 cent for the the first episode that she did, and then she got 2 cents for the second a month. So,
Okay.
I mean, that is just crazy that you would be kind of the mind behind. Like, obviously, there's a creator and then there's a writer who takes that creation and brings it to life. That you would bring this whole
Yeah.
thing to life, and you're getting paid pennies for something that has millions of streams. Like, it just seems crazy to me that that would even be allowed. But to your point, when it first started, no one knew streaming would be as big. And I'll be honest with you, in our house, all we do is stream. I mean, I have cable
Right.
for sports, but outside of sports, I never watch cable. I don't think I've watched anything. I think my daughters watch like American Idol or something. But outside of that, that's
Yeah.
and even if I miss it, I just go to Hulu and rewatch it so I don't have to have commercials and stuff. So streaming is definitely taken over, and something needs to be done for writers because, to your point, shorter episodes, less episodes. And it seems like the current deal that they have is not real great for streaming.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I wish that, it's funny because my wife and I were just trying to figure out, like, can we completely cut the cord? Could we get rid of cable and just do streaming? And it's like there's really only about maybe 12 or 14 channels that we actually watch out of the hundreds that you get in cable. And unfortunately, they don't really offer an a la carte package like they do in Europe, where you can just go, just give me these channels,
Yeah.
But yeah.
With the popularity of streaming, you think that they would do that, because that would, I think, simplify things and probably cause less people to cut the cord if you could just pick what you need and then have a pricing structure around that. But that'll never happen.
Yeah.
They're going to get their $100
Probably not.
no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, David, you got a lot going on, it seems like, which is really exciting. We have the Kickstarter, which is really cool.
Yep.
Right now, so when you go to Kickstarter, it's Tinsel Town that they look up under Kickstarter.
Yeah, if you just look up Tinsel Town, or actually Tinsel Town Losing the Light,
Okay.
in the graphic novels comics category, it should come right up.
Yeah.
And we're, like I said, we're live until the end of May, and we're about 73% funded right now. So check it out, watch the video, see if it might be something you're interested in.
Yeah, no, that could be super exciting. I'm pulling for you. I'll definitely share it on our social media and hopefully get the word out there, and maybe 1 or 2 people will jump on board. I not that I have a lot of power, but we have a lot of followers, so I'm hoping that we could do it.
Awesome. I appreciate your support, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, and great meeting you at the con.
Yeah, it was great meeting you. There's another one in Paris, by the way. I don't know if you've been hit up.
Oh, is there?
There is, yeah.
No.
June 10th. And it's supposed to be about 3 times the size as this one. So I'll send you an email with some information if you're interested.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, it was fun. Are you doing Revolution, I think it's called, out in Ontario at all, or?
No, I've done Revolution before 2 or 3 times. I'm not doing it this year, but maybe in the future. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I've never been to it, to be honest. So yeah, Comic-Con Revolution in Ontario. I'm gonna try it this time and see what happens. Just walk it and
yeah.
But
it's a cool little con. I think you'll probably enjoy it. I mean, in terms of like local cons, have you been to WonderCon?
I have. WonderCon is really cool. I enjoy WonderCon a lot. Because
that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I don't do San Diego. It's just too big, too expensive. And I live about 2.5 hours away, so you got to get a hotel, and it's hard to find. And I mean, I love it. It's pretty exciting to be there, but it's just too big. I don't want to stand in line. We already go to Disneyland enough. I don't want to stand in any more lines, to be honest.
Believe me, I know. After I come back from San Diego, the thought of standing another line is just like anathema. Like, I can't do it.
Do you do San Diego too?
I have done it a couple of times.
Really?
I'm going to be there this year, not exhibiting, but just as a civilian. But I put in to do a couple panels, so we'll see if they get approved.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, David, I'm super excited to meet you. Thank you for signing my trade. That'll go up.
Oh, my pleasure.
Everybody else that's been on the show. So I have a wall where I'm starting to stick everybody's signed book on the wall, so I'll throw you up there
Oh,
too.
great.
So great to meet you. Congratulations on all your success around Tinsel Town, and everyone go to that Kickstarter and check it out. Let's support David and make sure that he hits that goal.
Sounds good, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Take care.
You too.